Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Founders in LA. I'm your host, Ethan Cole, and this is an opportunity to shine the spotlight through a product lens on some of the exceptional startup founders we have as part of the LA community in an unedited, one take organic conversation. With us today is Sam Polk of Everytable. Thank you so much for coming down to the studio, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
This is great. I'm excited to have you and share your story, your mission. It's incredible. So thank you so much. But first, a word from our sponsors. Founders in LA is brought to you by United Club. United Club is the co-working space that sets itself apart. With locations in El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, and Hermosa, United is where creativity flourishes. Unlike traditional offices where they provide an inspiring environment where ideas can thrive and businesses can grow. With United, there's no hidden fees, flexible terms, options for dedicated offices, and unlimited access to conference rooms, a photo studio, this podcast studio, plus standard and 3D printers and 24/7 access at any of their locations. They're local champions who support neighborhood businesses, open their event spaces to nonprofits, and celebrate art, music, and culture. Join United Club and experience co-working like never before. Learn more at www.united.club. That's www.unita.club. We're also brought to you by the Product Manager Association Los Angeles, available at pma.la. They're the largest professional organization for product and designers in LA, with more than 5,000 members from over 500 companies. They host monthly meetups, organize the Product Leader Council, have a mentorship program where they connect working product managers with students from underrepresented groups to build a better and more diverse next gen. And they're hosting the LA Tech Connect conference where their practicality meets AI, and they're having workshops on product engineering, design, and marketing, and how people are introducing generative AI tools into daily workflows. To learn more, go to pma.la. Our guest today is Sam Polk. He's the founder and CEO of Everytable. Sam, can you give us a 30-second description of Everytable?
Sure. Everytable is basically the answer to the question of why does a McDonald's burger and fries cost $6 and a sweet green salad costs $16.
Okay.
And it's basically a business that's making fresh, healthy food affordable and accessible for everyone, everywhere, through a network of our own grab-and-go stores, our own smart fridges, and e-commerce delivery direct to the home.
That's absolutely incredible. And that is, there's definitely a divide between folks who have access, even just, I believe, geographic access to healthy food, and then add on top of that the economic access to it.
I think that's 100% right. Like if you're in Santa Monica or Brentwood, your options for healthy food, forget the grocery stores, of which there are so many, but also for prepared food restaurants, you can get Sweetgreen, Tender Greens, Tokaya, Press Juicery, Creation, Mendocino Farms. I mean, throw a rock, you're going to hit a fast casual healthy food chain.
Right.
In places like South Los Angeles, East Los Angeles, but even sort of less, not sort of fully underserved neighborhoods, but sort of even middle income neighborhoods like Van Nuys, Bellflower, Downey, there are very few options. And the reason there's very few options is not because people don't like healthy food. It's because, basically it's hard to get really high quality, healthy food to a price point that is not only for the most affluent.
That's incredible. And yeah, I've heard that grocery stores themselves are often underrepresented in lower income.
Not only are grocery stores underrepresented, but also the produce that is offered there is sort of subpar. Like they'll move produce from higher income neighborhoods as it starts to get more perishable into the lower income neighborhoods, or there'll be plenty of grocery stores with just significantly less fresh food for sale.
Really? So in terms of just kind of the produce and the produce industry, geography matters, not just in price point, but in the quality.
And the breadth of offering. Like if you think, people sometimes think that like grocery stores are the answer to what they call food deserts or food inequality. But if you think about what a grocery store is, like the traditional grocery stores have, some fresh food on the perimeters. But in the middle, it's just row after row after row of chips and cereal and, cookies and all of these things have, recently become clear that they are devastating to our health. And so, even if you put a grocery store like that, but you take away a lot of the fresh stuff, yeah, you've got a grocery store, but you're still exacerbating the problem.
Wow, and that's probably something that will become as news to many of the listeners here, many of our audience, that there are really inequalities throughout the system. So, how did you find yourself in this world? Like, how did you come to want to spend time in that? I believe you've been around now for 8 years.
8 years, yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, it was 3 years before that we started a nonprofit sort of focused on the same issue. And, I sort of took a very circuitous path here. So I grew up in Los Angeles, went to school in New York. After college, went to Wall Street and was basically a hedge fund trader until I was 30, and then basically had like a quarter life crisis, and started reading a bunch of civil rights books and decided that I didn't want to just make money for wealthy people for the rest of my life. And so ended up resigning and not knowing what I was going to do until one weekend my wife and I sat down and watched all the Netflix food documentaries. Do you remember that? Like
Okay.
Food Inc., Forks Over Knives. They were big. And there was one that was called A Place at the Table that was about the intersection of food and poverty.
Hmm.
And that was the first time that I'd heard, words like food desert and food inequality. And to me, it just seemed like this simple idea that healthy food should be a human right and not a luxury product, which is effectively what it's become. And so that sort of moment of realization, led to just a sequence of steps. And the first thing was starting a nonprofit that was called Grocery Ships, is now called Feast, that works with parents in underserved neighborhoods who want to get themselves and their families healthy. And so I was running groups in South Los Angeles, which, formerly called South Central, and just working with families who were sort of trying to get their arms around the health issues that their families were experiencing. And through that process, really came to understand that there was, a deep desire for fresh, healthy food in these communities, so much so that they had the city council had banned more fast food restaurants from coming in to South Central. And it's crazy. Like, I was on a corner in South Central the other day, and the number of, McDonald's and Carl's Jr. and Burger Kings and Louisiana Fried Chicken and Popeyes and Pizza Hut and Domino's just back to back to back to back is astounding.
Still today.
Still. And actually the truth of it is that those locations are also in affluent neighborhoods. So it's not like, it's a big misconception, I think, that people in underserved neighborhoods only like that kind of food, because frankly, we all like that kind of food.
Right.
The difference is there's no other option in places like South LA or Watts or Compton until now.
Wow. So you were influenced by Netflix. So I think it was incredible in itself. I think as an LA company, I especially love that. That's amazing.
Totally.
But beyond the inception, you created a nonprofit and were working with the families themselves. So then, at what point did you recognize or identify or see there's a real need beyond the nonprofit, creating a company? There's the problem set you found was large enough and I guess viable enough for you to really go with it.
I mean, it was more, it was almost like, spiritual is the wrong word, but it had to do with my own sort of like personal realizations and growth, where, on Wall Street, I'd had this career that was 100% focused on ambition and money. And then it was almost like I forswore that, side of myself and said, I'm going to be fully of service, and was very happy doing the work for the nonprofit. But basically two things happened. One, I started to see how challenging it is to scale a nonprofit. They're just not set up to scale in the same way that for-profits are. Like, you've got, in the last 10 years, Airbnb and, Uber and Lyft and like these huge success stories in the for-profit world. There's nothing similar in nonprofit. And that's not because there's not good ideas. It's because there's no funding mechanism to scale an idea. The second thing was that, we'd made a little bit of money on Wall Street, but we're having kids in Los Angeles. And
Right.
so, that's a whole different ball game. And so I started to realize that like I needed to do something that basically brought together these sort of two almost polar opposite sides of me, which is whether I like it or not, I have this deep desire to build something big and work really hard. And then I also have this deep passion for making the world a more equitable, fair place. And, I guess it's sort of like partnering with the underdog in some level is like just what I've always been drawn to. And so Everytable's to me is sort of like the perfect expression of both of those in the world.
That's fantastic. And so, can you speak to more about where Everytable's at today?
Yeah, so we were founded in 2016. We've raised in the neighborhood of $120 million of capital. That has gone to expanding our business now to 65 of our own locations throughout Southern California and also some in Northern California that are just about to open.
And those are brick and mortar stores.
Brick and mortar grab and go locations. And then we also have 10 stores in New York City. We have a network of in the neighborhood of 300 smart fridges across mostly Los Angeles and San Diego. We have an e-commerce business, and we also have a thriving government food service business where we provide healthy, fresh meals to homeless shelters, to food insecure senior citizens, to government funded nonprofits who feed the food insecure. And so we've just got a growing, complicated, operationally challenging business that is, really providing food at healthy, fresh food at less than the price of fast food, and is, frankly, the only company in the country doing that. So, as any entrepreneur knows, it's a brutal, vicious, journey.
Right.
And, I'm proud of a lot of sort of how far we've come.
That's fantastic. And through your journey, and you identified a problem and you've come up with a solution. Was it one of those things? It's like, why isn't anyone doing this? Like, if did it turn out to be like, yes, not trying to dismiss any of the challenges of starting an early stage startup, because that's fantastic, and doing the logistics of what you're looking to do is unfathomable. But in terms of the solution for getting the healthier food in the places where other companies aren't typically putting that, where are you just kind of like, yeah, guys, like, it's honest, it's not that it's hard, it's very hard to do the business, but it's why aren't we doing this? This really isn't. It's not like we're trying to send someone to Mars. It's not someone trying to send someone to the moon. Like,
Yeah,
you take this food and make it available to these people.
for sure. It's no SpaceX. I think the reason that I've sort of come to believe this is sort of twofold. Sort of one that I don't think makes a lot of sense, and then one that does make sense. The thing that doesn't make sense is that if you think about all of the capital is, held by, people that come from a certain demographic and background. And,
Right.
I love Los Angeles deeply, and it's a very segregated city where, the people that hold capital often have experience in Hollywood and the West Side and downtown LA and Pasadena, and not a lot of experience in South LA and Compton and Inglewood, besides what they've seen sort of portrayed in the movies. And so I think there was a bias against the idea that there was demand for healthy food in underserved neighborhoods. That's the part that I think doesn't make sense. What does make sense is that in order to get to a price point for perishable food that is as good as McDonald's, you have to do a lot of things differently. And in the food business, what that means is basically vertically integrating. So we do our own sourcing and procurement from farms. We run two big commissaries in LA, the 40,000 square foot commissary, where we've got massive pieces of equipment and incredible chefs turning these ingredients into fresh, healthy, delicious meals. Then we've got our own logistics network that is running a fleet of 30 refrigerated vans that drive all over the city. And then we've also had to get good at sort of running our own retail locations. And the reason for all of that is basically twofold, is that in order to keep the prices low, you can't let margin escape. So you've got to keep all the margin together. But also because it's fresh, perishable food, which is so much harder than non-perishable food, it means we have to get it the food from the kitchen to the hands of the consumer as quickly as possible. So you can't do the sort of standard, you make a box of cookies, you send it to a distributor, it sits on their shelves for a while, then they send it to various retailers. There's none of that. And so, that's the part that now, 8 years in, I understand. I was like, oh, this is a lot to do, a lot for a single company to figure out. And, as like companies are all sort of subject to the same laws of capitalism, which is effectively you take in this money as initial investment and you've either got to turn that into profit or enough progress to get investment at higher and higher valuations so you don't lose control of the company.
Right.
And so to do that with fresh food, which is like, food business is incredibly low margin and hard.
Right.
Fresh food business, even harder. Fresh food business at fast food prices, even harder. And then doing that at fast food prices and vertically integrating to do that is even harder. So not to, toot my own horn, like, I think all businesses are tough, but, it's only in retrospect that I understood how operationally challenging this business is.
Absolutely. And oftentimes it's even hard, to your point, to do it for the underdog. And if you're to do it for the most affluent and solve the most minuscule problem, it's oftentimes those paths are like easier and paved with gold. Whereas this one is, to your point, you're staying true to the mission, staying true to the reason why you started in the first place, which is fantastic. So thank you again so much for sharing. And it sounds like you are entrenched in LA, and we often have to ground us in LA. You've already grounded very thoroughly here, but love to hear, what's your most LA thing?
Oh, that's funny. So I guess I have two, both related to Everytable. One of our great investors, early investors who invested in several rounds, is a guy named Baron Davis, who grew up in Compton, played at Crossroads in Santa Monica, and then went to UCLA where he was a huge star, and then went pro where he was multi-year NBA All-Star. And the reason he invested is we brought him down to the Everytable in Compton, and he said, "Oh, I get it. This is Erewhon for the hood." And I was like, yep, that's perfect. And then the second one is, I recently posted on LinkedIn that I was looking to talk to somebody who could give me some, advice on sort of like influencer marketing. And out of nowhere, a guy wrote me who basically said, "I'm the head of this film production company. Let me give you a call." And it turns out he's the head of RuPaul's film production company. And it turns out that RuPaul goes to our West Hollywood location all the time because it's across from his office, and loves it. And so that has sort of led to an inadvertent conversation about RuPaul getting more involved with Everytable.
Oh my gosh, that is fantastic. That's quintessential LA right there. Yeah. And from your perspective as a brand, to get that influencer interest, they're a fan already. They're already using it. That the being genuine in those posts really makes a difference. And so fantastic. Congrats again.
Awesome.
Well, thank you again for joining us, Sam, and introducing us to Everytable. I'd like to thank our sponsors, PMALA and Unita. I'd like to thank you all for listening to us. And if you like what you hear, please smash that subscribe button. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next time on Founders in LA.